A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome also if you're listening in on the recording rebroadcast of this webinar. This is the UK Contact Centre Forum's Innovation and Best Practice webinar series, and today's edition is Email Customer Service, and it is kindly and generously supported today by Kana Software. So, a very warm welcome. As I say, this is part of the UK Contact Centre Forum's agenda of knowledge share events, both digital on webinar and also face-to-face events around the country. Today's topic is email customer service, and we've got a really varied agenda of interviewees and presentations for you today. My name is John Snow. I'm the current chair of the Directors Club of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and it's my pleasure to host this webinar on behalf of the UK Contact Centre Forum. Just to give you a little bit of background, the UK Contact Centre Forum was actually formed about 4.5 years ago now, and currently has just shy of 8,000 UK members, consisting of all of the professions that cover the contact centre, so contact centre management at all levels, and also resource planning and training, quality monitoring, etc. Now, our guest speakers for today on our subject of email customer service are Derek Smith, who's Head of Contact Centre at Wellbeing, Barry Ibbertson, who is Head of Corporate Contact Centre Customer Services at Leeds City Council, and Mark Davis, who's Head of Contact Centre Services at the Environment Agency. We also have our innovator today. We always have a resident innovator at our Innovation and Best Practice webinars. And our innovator for today is Stephen Thurlow, who's Head of Worldwide Product Strategy at Kana Software. So our running order, if you are new to the Innovation and Best Practice format, then we have a selection of fireside chat style interviews and also a presentation from our resident innovator of the day. So we're going to be leading off with Derek Smith and then handing over the innovation spotlight to Stephen Thurlow, back over to Barry Ibbertson, and finally we've got Mark Davis as our final interview. Now, that should all come in at around the 1 hour mark. So if you're only staying with us for the first hour, Mark Davis is our final interview of the day. Then we have the panel session for 30 minutes to make up the rest of our agenda. So hopefully you can stay with us for that panel Q&A where you the audience, can ask questions of our panel of experts. So if you do want to ask questions, you can do so at any time during the event. You don't have to wait till the end of a particular presentation, or you don't have to wait right to the end. You can actually ask questions at any time during the proceedings. You do that very simply by hitting the question mark, which is the Q&A icon on the floating toolbar, which probably is on the right-hand side of your screen. You can move that about if you so wish. That will bring up your Q&A box, and in the smaller box, which is at the bottom, you can put in your question up to 256 characters, and it can be as simple or as complex as you wish. Now, hopefully we can cover as many of your questions as possible during today's Q&A session. If we don't, the appropriate guest or Stephen Thurlow, our innovator, will respond directly to you with an answer post the event. Now, always remember, once you've written your question in that small window, to hit the send button so it comes through to us here. You can also tweet about this webinar, and our hashtag for today is UKCCF, which is short for UK Contact Centre Forum. So if you're tweeting about the content or about the event itself, just go hashtag UKCCF as part of your Twitter message. So on with the show, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first guest for today, Derek Smith. And Derek Smith is Head of Contact Centre at Wellbeing. So first of all, welcome to you, Derek.
Thank you very much, John.
How are you doing? Are you okay today?
I'm fine, thank you, in wet and windy Eastbourne.
Excellent, excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have on your screens a biography of Derek, so you can so you can read through that at your leisure. But Derek, if you can just give a little bit of an introduction to yourself and current role, and also sort of how you come to have a view on email, both in your current and or former roles.
Yeah, sure. Basically, I'm working at the moment as head of contact centre for Wellbeing, which is a lifeline emergency contact centre. Basically that's predominantly responding to alarms and contacts from about 42,000 vulnerable people who we support and help to sort of live independently. Prior to joining Wellbeing, I worked in a variety of different sort of organisations, including health, local government, and as detailed, travel and financial services. My experience with emails, I think it's a channel that we're starting to develop here. I think the term, I'm not sure whether it's now defunct, is the silver surfers, and how we support that section of the community. But prior to that, working at Kent County Council, where emails was used quite extensively. We handled about 100,000 emails a year in a wide range of services and a variety of sort of questions flowing from that.
Good stuff. Excellent. Well, thanks very much for that, Derek. And I think the first question I'm going to ask you, just to kick off our sort of exploration of the topic of email, is email still a relevant channel today in terms of being an observer of the contact center industry for the sort of the past decade? We've seen the rise of lots of alternative channels. The days when it was just a call center, just taking voice calls, has gone, and now there's web chat and social media and customer communities and all sorts of ways that customers or clients can interact with us as organisations. So, what's your view on the relevance of email or the place of email today in our portfolio of channels?
Right. I think from my experience, emails is a valid medium of communication because people want to use it. So that the dilemma there is, if people want to communicate via emails, do you want to, engage in that communication channel, or do you want to discourage people from using it? I think if you acknowledge that email is something that people use because of their circumstances, because of their personal preference, whatever the motivation may be, then it then becomes important to engage with people using emails. And I think you touched on it before, but I think the challenge for contact centers is that there's not one channel takes over or replaces the other. It just becomes an additional channel. So this is where I think you said call centers, clue in the title, used to just deal with calls, but now the contact center has to engage in whatever medium of communication the customer wants to.
And do you see that email is different from other channels? Does it have any particular advantages over other channels? What's the sort of how does it sort of compare and contrast with other channels in terms of why people use it or want to use it?
Yeah, I mean, emails can be very useful in terms of they're not time critical, and it can be dependent on how you handle emails. The cost can be quite low because you can utilize downtime within the organisation when calls aren't as it's not as busy with calls. So I don't know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon may be an example of that. So email can actually help in terms of being relatively cost effective to support. It also can be useful in terms of sending links with maybe a template letter or a link with a specific element of the website, whereby people can then sort of look at and understand more about wherever their question was.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a busy lifestyle where people maybe don't have the time to make the call, wait for the call to be answered, engage in that conversation, it can be less time critical, the content can be a lot richer, and you can get a lot more information.
So those are the positives of email as a channel, and now I like particularly the point around you can add a richer amount of material through attachments and links, etc. I think that's particularly interesting. Do you see that? Obviously, email is a text form of interaction. Do you see that perhaps live chat as also a sort of a text form of interaction? Do you see that is taking over from email, or is the email still distinct from live chat as a form of text communication?
I think that again, it's that dilemma. It can supplement or indeed complement other communication channels, and as more opportunities for different channels are added to the offering, then it inevitably will have an impact. But whether it will completely replace, I don't think so at the moment. But that will always change. I think with mobile phones, with tablets and what have you, you start to give opportunities that maybe weren't, sort of available to people. And how that will actually change the way that the public interact with organisations. I think that's the challenge in terms of facilitating that, supporting it, but also not blocking people. So, I think there is going to be an impact, and I think web chat, is one which possibly would replace the email channel for some people. But again, you're talking about the time criticality of that. It's real-time interaction. Whereas with email, if you're busy, you just fire off an email
and wait for a response.
Do whatever you want to do. Get back, dip into the response, and then sort of take it from there.
Yeah, no, I think that I think from the user experience perspective, I think that point about time criticality and not wanting or not wanting at that point in their day, let's say, as a customer to enter into a conversation, they just want to shoot some off and then get on with something else. I think that's a very important point. In terms of you were saying that you're looking at introducing or scaling up email within wellbeing. Having a blank canvas, is that a good thing in terms of starting from scratch in terms of introducing email? Can you introduce some of the learning experiences from, let's say, your days at Kent County Council in terms of how to do it well and things to avoid? What are the sort of headlines in terms of sort of things that you should definitely do in terms of the organisational perspective of introducing email and the things you should avoid?
Well, I think in terms of what I've learned as being the way to actually handle emails well, first of all, is really trying to facilitate the merging of emails as a channel with other channels. So, as an example, that the ACD system can actually present calls as well as emails using skills-based routing to skilled operators, advisors, who have the training and the knowledge to be able to answer the questions, be that via email or be that via call. And that way, and you can set a variety of sort of parameters in terms of establishing maybe a queue on emails because it's busy with calls, but then as soon as the calls die down, you then have emails that are presented with an escalation. So maybe there's a keyword which you will identify as being something that would prompt that email to be prioritized, to be answered. So there are ways in which you can actually, with little extra cost or with little extra training, manage that extra communication channel very, very easily, and it improves productivity and is a positive thing for the organisation. I think in terms of what I did learn from my experience is that not everybody is skilled to actually handle an email well. And by that I mean, just because somebody, an operator, an advisor, is a good call handler, I learned from bitter experience that you shouldn't automatically assume that that individual is actually good at interacting with email. And by that I mean, sort of the content, the style, just even basic grammar can sometimes not be as good as what you want. And I think you've always got to be very careful about email, in that it's very, once you've got it sort of sent, you press the send button, it's then there to be seen by all and sundry. Whereas a call, it's obviously an interactive engagement between two people, and once that call is finished, then that record, so to speak, and I know we do call recording, what have you, but there's less of a record of that engagement. Whereas with emails, if you maybe sent a response which is maybe wrong, or the meaning of the email has been misinterpreted, it very easily can go wrong, and it's there for everybody to see. And I think you also need to understand, sort of what is the service level for emails. When do you as an organisation want to decide what's a good email response time? And you may fool yourself that maybe, I don't know, 2 days is enough, but then if you start getting phone calls as a result of the non-response to the email, then you start to get involved in a bit of a vicious circle in terms of avoidable contact, because you're not actually meeting and matching the customer's needs. And then you've got, there are also other things in relation to templates and automatic responses, which can be very, very quick. But that's another thing. You've got to be careful. Just because you've acknowledged that you've received an email, that is not a response. And my experience is that sometimes organisations think that's enough, but obviously it's not. It's actually answering whatever that question is.
Derek, some great points well made. We're going to be picking up with other speakers the points around response times and also some of the quality control issues. But that's given us a great insight into some of your thoughts. And ladies and gentlemen, if you've got any questions arising from Derek's interview today, if you just hit that question mark, that Q&A icon, and drop a question. If you put Derek at the start of your question, then we'll know to direct it straight to Derek. But if you stay on the line, Derek, we're going to be bringing you into the Q&A panel session at the end of this presentation. But for now, thank you very much for your time. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be handing over to our innovation spotlight for today. So I'm going to bring in our second speaker on our agenda, Stephen Thurlow. Stephen.
Hi, John.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And as I said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Thurlow is the head of worldwide product strategy at Carna Software, a leading provider of contact center software, and in particular that has strengths in the area of email. So, Stephen, I'm going to just change over the slide deck to your slide deck, and then also hand you control of WebEx. So if you click once on the main panel, and over to you, Stephen.
That's great, John. Thanks very much. And yes, as John's confirmed my role, but what that really means is I get out to spend a lot of my time with our customers and prospects, and also with analysts and partners, looking at what people are trying to do with customer engagement and customer experience. And my job really is to make sure that we represent ourselves well in that world, but also that we drive our product forward based on the real needs we see in the industry going forward across a wide range of sectors and technology channels over time. So I'm going to whiz through a few slides just on the background of some of where we see email, look at some of the some recent research we've done with the Call Center Association on some of the practices that we're seeing in email, and then run through some quick points around best practice and where people need to take email in order to be able to respond to it effectively. And I think that will reinforce quite a lot of the points that Derek's helpfully made already. So diving through, email is one of these things, much like the contact center has been prophesied to be dead. Email seems to be the latest victim of prophecy, and most famous of which is clearly Mark Zuckerberg, although he's slightly biased and he's introducing a competitive messaging system at the same time. And there's this view that there's different perspectives on email as to whether it really is going to survive the revolution that the likes of social and chat and mobile have come together to challenge it with. And one of the questions asked is email going to go away? I think within that is a more subtle question, is saying, is email an effective form of communication compared to the other things that are available? And there's a lot of text on this slide, so I won't go through all the detail on it, but just, all the research that goes on behind that is saying actually email is a long way from dead. Indeed, it's potentially still increasing. And alongside it being a heavy channel of use, it also gets a fairly high degree of satisfaction. And some of the reasons for that is this whole the more robust auditing and practice that you can have with emails. That actually emails are viewed as a more authentic form of communication that you can lean back on, whereas sometimes something said verbally or in a store or on the phone isn't always as reliable. So people do start to see email as a very reliable form of communication. And the other thing is the whole area of convenience. As you say, you can fire and forget, and you can get a response asynchronously, and that's quite an important dynamic. And research we've done with ThinkJar is showing that organizations, that email is almost as prevalent as phone in terms of customer service, that it's not going away, but it's not necessarily an area where people are investing more just now. And I think one of the challenges is people have put email systems in, but have then left them as email systems. And I'll come to talk about that as we go through, because what we see is a lot of the work is now going into the social and the self-service world, which is where it should do, but email does form part of that journey as well, and it's important to put them together. So I'm going to run through a couple of slides on system research we've done recently with the Call Center Association in the UK. I'm really starting to look at how people are handling email, as well as whether email is a channel that they use. And one of these key areas is this whole area of response time, and what is normal, what is good, and the bottom line is how do you match an expectation of a customer? And I think one of the things that's changed with social media and other things coming in is that while email is still a very prevalent form of communication and customers desire to use it, their expectations and demands of response time have increased significantly. So I think, as Derek said, what used to happen in a couple of days now really needs to happen in a couple of hours or less. And I think the more immediate, the better the service that you can give for the email. So it's no longer that you can just leave it queuing in the background, hoping you'll get to it eventually. You do actually have to treat it as a mainstream channel that you optimize your effectiveness around. And this is an example of organizations, that almost 2/3 of them are taking 8 hours or more to respond to an email, which breaks the immediacy and changes the whole nature of the engagement with a customer. Whereas we are seeing organizations able to deliver the less than 4-hour response consistently and regularly. And then one of the other questions we asked was whether people actually use a system to manage email. And we were surprised at how low this percentage of yes was. That a number of organizations, 2/3, are still using almost ad hoc forms of email management just to see what comes in. Either they're using kind of almost Outlook-style inboxes that somebody then redistributes to others to send work around places. And the whole kind of traceability and management of email falls down at that point. So we were surprised that this was so low. But equally surprising was this one, because one of the challenges of email as customer service is it's not always an effective way, and it certainly isn't an effective way to solve a complex problem, because you can end up with a lot of back and forward going on. And if you compare that with chat or phone or others where you can get a more immediate feedback, then you can respond faster. But we were surprised here to see that half the organizations here are resolving emails in kind of 70% or more of the cases, and that's quite a good success rate to get that back in response. I think one of the other points here is that response doesn't always have to be email. You can respond in other ways, and I'll pick that up in the points to consider as we go forward, that sometimes it's other channels that you would use to respond to these things. So one of the interesting things is looking at how people have tried to manage email, because one of the challenges we've seen is that people have often, emails kind of, once you open an email address, it's kind of exploded, that people email in for almost every reason, and then people go through this whole kind of, how do I reduce my number of emails because it's so inefficient and the volume's growing and it's not very predictable. So people do work on the website in terms of frequently asked questions, or looking at how that they can deflect or de-escalate the incoming email contact. And again, we're surprised that only 5% of people said it was very effective. There's a number of people who are doing it, and it's partially effective, but a number of people are really struggling to cut down the volume of emails through putting information on the website. And that again points to this view that email is part of a wider strategy and a wider channel strategy and a wider digital strategy, and not just a channel to manage in its own right. And this whole point about deflection or de-escalation. And deflection is really when you're saying, please don't call me, and you're trying to provide answers instead, or please don't email me, and you're trying to provide answers instead. And de-escalation is saying, well, you might be about to email me, but can I help you get your answer sooner? And that's a way of actually helping the customer online find the answer they need without necessarily going into the actual sending of an email itself. So the deflection, de-escalation, your strategy there is quite important about how you manage email in the more holistic sense when you look at it across the channels. And picking up some key points that we find in our engagement with customers and in working in email response management for 20 odd years now as a company, there's a number of things that we find are core best practices that need to come through here. And the first of these is a view that email does need to be managed. Is if you treat email on a more kind of ad hoc personal inbox Outlook style model, then it's very hard to deliver a consistent or scalable customer service effect to your customers. There's a whole bunch of areas where email management systems provide value in there. And one of those is the whole audit and tracking, is the ability to know what emails you've received, who looked at them when they were responded to, and then you start to look within that at how you actually can optimize those bits and pieces. And then you get the view of how do you look at trends and challenges and categories in here. So as you analyze them and look at the topics and the trends and the resolutions, how do you spot things both in the short term? So if you've just released a new product and you're suddenly getting a host of emails because the manual's missing a page or there's a part missing or something, how do you spot that quickly to see the trends that are emerging so that you can put answers back out either on the website, directly, proactively to customers, or equipping your agents to be effectively able to handle those emails really quickly? And also in the long run, saying, well, what are the reasons people are emailing me, so I can then say, when is this a valuable form of contact and when is it not a valuable form of contact? So someone's emailing in and maybe they've got that you want them to attach images, maybe of an insurance accident or something else, then that's probably a good form of email. Whereas if they're emailing in asking when's the store open, then that's probably a bad form of email. So looking at how you can identify the types and styles of contact and working out which of those are appropriate for this channel and which of those you can encourage better ways of solving on other channels. And then there's this whole area of what I call service levels and tracking. It is, you're only going to get to a better response time if you manage it and you measure it and you report on it. And one of the key things there is that you can then start to both actively and even dynamically set customers' expectations, that if they email into a queue and you know how long it takes to answer emails on that queue on average, then you can actually send the auto response. So yes, it's an auto response, but you can actually set the expectations in that, saying we will our service level for you is 8 hours, but we expect to get back to you in 2. Or our current service level is looking at 2 hours. You can set those expectations with customers. So yes, you use the auto response, then the customer knows they've been received and the expectations are set, and then the wider management of that goes on. And the final piece of management is around, if someone's emailed in and then they phone, and there's no evidence of that email anywhere because it's in some Outlook system, then it's really hard to join those things up. Whereas if it's part of a managed email, it's logged against the customer's record, then you can make much more value out of that and be much more joined up. And then, so the first point was email needs to be managed. Second point is email is part of a digital strategy. It's really important to think of digital customer engagement as a holistic area, which does include a number of assisted service channels as well as self-service. So digital is not all about self-service, although clearly self-service both on the web, the tablet, and the mobile is really important. But so is the assisted service, whether it's chat, social media, email, web form submissions. They're all assisted service at that point. And blending these together and making sure that there isn't a gap between your kind of self-service or e-commerce side of your business and your customer service side of your business, closing that gap is really important. And thinking, where does email fit as part of an overall digital customer engagement strategy? Because we all know, whether it's public sector or commercial sector, organizations need to engage customers digitally in addition to with the traditional models of face-to-face and call center. And the blend of those and understanding how they fit together is a key way in which you tackle the email strategy. And then the second point is about information and context, is if someone is emailing you as part of a digital engagement, you can normally take context and meaning from where they are to add value to how that email can be managed. So that could be, for example, they're on a mobile device and they're away from home. You may get a location service. You may get so maybe on your website or in your app or either on a mobile or a tablet, and you may be able to get more information. So this whole idea of saying, rather than just saying email info at this, why don't I ask some questions and get some answers first, which A, may help me de-escalate the point, but B, they give you much more category information to help me route this email appropriately. And thirdly, they also give me a learning point just to say, how do I understand why people are emailing me so that I can manage that over time to give them a better experience if possible. So this idea of taking information and context, whether it's from a dynamic web form, whether it's from mobile environments, whether it's from an app, the information and context adds to how you manage email. Email doesn't just become a standalone out there on the edge kind of channel, but it's rooted firmly in the digital channel strategy. And the final point is, once you engage the digital world effectively, then you need to adapt to this always-on, ubiquitous access point. Is whether it's social or chat or web or email, customers are 24/7. And when suits them to email doesn't necessarily suit you to receive it. And looking at how you can set and manage expectations and you can be effective for all your customer base across their own model is really important. And as well as being part of a digital strategy, email needs to be part of an omni-channel strategy. And by omni-channel, we're really thinking going beyond multi-channel and thinking of separate channels to thinking really that there aren't any channels, there's just people. That there's customers who need service and there's people or systems helping them. And how do you get the best response to the customer in the right way? And the image there is from a Harvard Business Review article talking about it's great to manage touch points well. And people have done these moments of truth mapping and optimizing and engineering operations around improving touch point management. But ultimately for the customer, it's the journey. It's how they go from deciding that they have a need to being fully resolved in that journey, whether it's in one channel or otherwise, that's the whole experience. And what we find is that multi-channel is now normal. So customers will typically have been on your website before the email or phone, that you need to look at how cross-channel is joined up in terms of information, that you need to support what I would call agile channeling. How do you encourage or enable customers to move from one channel to another effectively? And that might be intentional channeling as well. And the most obvious form of that is choosing to answer an email with a phone call. And I was even sat listening to some, I'm doing a side-by-side observation yesterday in an email center and seeing an email come in and them phoning them straight back. It's a complex query, you need more information, and the experience of being phoned back within 5 minutes of sending an email is extremely positive for the customer. It also gets a much swifter resolution. So looking at how you can blend the channels together and think holistically about channels rather than saying email as a one-off. And then just a couple of quick slides talking of where we fit into this. So, we've been doing email management for a long time, but we're also doing things like knowledge management and contact center desktops, and then blending these together. And the core approach we have is to think in this omni-channel view. Is that how do we make it consistent, complete, and contextual? So how do we give customers the same quality of engagement, so the same answers, the same speed of response, same business processes and outcomes, irrespective of which channel they're on. The ability to get the organization not divided by channel or departmental silo, but to be holistic in the way they view a customer so that data and communication and transition is easily managed. One of the dangers just now is email will get back saying, if this doesn't answer your question, please phone, or you go into a chat and someone says, please phone this number, and it's looking at how you can empower the service agents and join the channels up to get complete service to the customer. And finally, it's about contextual. It's about giving the person answering the email the right environment of customer information, responses or templates to help them, and also knowledge to help them as well, and the wider process around QA and management of that. So how do you actually manage all of that together so the agent has got an optimized environment for answering email and it's contextual to them? And our view of that is that whatever stage of the customer cycle you're in, the organization is there to serve. So there's an everyone serves mentality needs to come out, but you're helping the customer discover products, you're helping the customer acquire, fulfill, and get use out of products, you're helping them in how they renew and maximize the value of a product. And you're doing that across all the channels and across the whole life cycle. And this consistent, complete contextual brings into there. So being able to manage every customer touch point, but with the right communication technology, knowledge management, business process capability. So you offer that customer-centric view across all the channels, and email fits very strongly within that. And that's all I wanted to say, just as a quick perspective on some of the research we've looked at, some of the key things we think around managing email, seeing it as part of a digital strategy and an omni-channel strategy, and being able to put email as part of a really effective vehicle. When it's well managed, it's a real asset to the organization and an asset to the customer. But if you don't do it with a strategy, then it will become chaotic and out of control very, very quickly. And if you want to learn any more about us, there's some information on there. But I'll just hand back to John and for the next interviews.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Great stuff. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to a live broadcast, we'll provide contact details post the event in a follow-up email, so you can get in touch with Stephen and also go through to the Kana website and see more about their offering. But thank you very much for now, Stephen. If you've got any questions for Stephen, anything in particular, if you can hit that question mark icon and mark it Stephen and put your question in there, and we'll address as many of those as we can. At the end of the program, Stephen will be joining us for the Q&A session. For the moment, Stephen, I'll take control of WebEx back off you and speak to you a little bit later on.
Thanks.
So, ladies and gentlemen, continuing with our agenda for today, we have our second interview, and joining us now, if I just unmute, Barry Ibbertson, and Barry is Head of Corporate Contact Centre Customer Services at Leeds City Council. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you. Good morning.
How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks very much. The weather's brightened up a little and might not need a sou'wester on going home.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Right. Well, just to start with, Barry, if you can just give a little bit of summary of yourself and your experience in the contact center world. On the screen there, ladies and gentlemen, is a short biography for Barry. But Barry, if you could just, in a few sentences, just give an overview of yourself, and also sort of, if you could start off by giving us an understanding of how email is structured within your contact center environment.
Quite certainly, John. Yes. Morning, everybody. I've been lucky enough to have 2 or 3 careers, but my first career was with Yorkshire Electricity. I've been managing customer service teams and contact centres since about 1986. So I was there largely at the beginning when these things were quite small. Many changes, of course. Emails. Well, I found them very difficult to manage. I've been listening to the first 2 presenters there, and there is a difference of opinion on many things. If I tell you that I'm now with Leeds City Council, and we have somewhere around 35 different services within the contact centre of 250 seats, and the services range from anything from grass cutting and bin collection through to quite difficult social care calls, perhaps some from children. So it can be quite a very wide spectrum of calls that we get, and information and indeed knowledge that we need to answer them. In about 2010, we were getting somewhere around 50,000 emails a year. The service we were giving, most of you will faint at this, was about 10 days. Now, I fainted at that time as well at that stage. We were struggling to manage them, is the short answer, largely because, again, of the spectrum of emails that we were getting and the knowledge needed. But I endeavoured to experiment by creating a specific email team rather than the emails be within the services. The reason for that was, again, to try and improve the target date, but also the inconsistency of replies and the lack of service experts. So we looked at standard paragraphs. We looked at, of course, what we need from a manning point of view, and that became very quickly a reason why we hadn't got sufficient staff was largely because of the money situation. And of course, as you well know, that's only got worse. We continued to run the email team for a while, but realised that it just wasn't working, largely because the emails got more frequent as customers got the hang of what they needed to do or not do, and consequently I was sticking more money, more staff into the email team to try and keep up. There was no shrinkage cover, and very, very difficult, and we found it not an easy situation at all. So it didn't work, so I put the teams or the work back into the specific teams of handling the 35 services that we do have. And in doing that, tried to find some way of getting around this 10 days. And it did work to some extent. But the volumes were getting worse and worse, and so we had to try and think more about channel shift, and that there then brings in another story altogether about how we've managed that.
So Barry, in terms of the increasing volumes of emails, was that in line with increasing volumes of other channels as well in terms of volumes, or was it specifically that your customers, for those large variety of services that you were covering, were just choosing or had a preference to use email? Did you get to the bottom of what was causing that volume growth?
I think it was, well, let me go back to the first question, John. No, it didn't have an increase in the calls. We levelled the calls at about 1.5 million a year, but the emails went up, as I said, double, even with the calls still being the same number, and that was largely the problem.
And was it a particular type of email? Because I think what other presenters have said today is obviously people email for a wide variety of queries. From very simple, what time does your offices open, through to complex emails that require, a specialist to respond to them. So yeah. Was it that you were getting a growth of volume of let's say commodity style queries, or was it a growth per se in the sort of the heavy duty?
It was a bit of both, things like you haven't collected my bin today, why? Against the situation where you might have a social care professional coming on using email because they couldn't get through on the phone. So it was, I think looking back, it was because we, particularly in 2010-11, were struggling with the phone service as well in certain areas. As you appreciate, a social care call might take 30 minutes. So one has to manage the situation dependent on the subject. So it was a situation really where the emails were just getting out of control. The way to tackle that, if in fact it was because they weren't getting the calls, was to get the calls sorted out. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of work trying to get the response times much better, and we did that so much so that we were answering 94-95% of calls in something less than a minute wait. That might not be perfect for everybody, but it seemed to work for our customers because they felt that they were getting the right answer first time.
And have you, as a consequence, seen a falling off of the email volumes, or do you think people's current sort of growth of digital lifestyles means that they've always got a little computer on somewhere in terms of a tablet or a smartphone, so the ease of shooting off an email while on the bus or on the train to work means that it's more it's becoming increasingly convenient to interact with organisations wherever you are.
Yeah, we haven't seen a falling off, but we haven't seen an increase. So
and
you
that
might
too,
say
and that should
we've held it.
Okay, no, that's cool. And going back to that, moving from having one big email team to having those discrete email teams within each of those sort of service sort of divisions within the contact center, has that would you say that would you recommend to an equally complex organisation that is the way to go down?
Yes, because you've got your experts within the team. I accept what I think it was Derek said, that not everybody's good at doing emails, but clearly if you've got the expertise within the team to do the email and those people have got the service knowledge as well, then you've got the good mix.
And from a, you touched on the situation with regard to sort of costs and budgets, and as we all know, government bodies, whether they're central or local or regional, are under a lot of pressure still, and it's still a downward pressure. Is email seen as an efficient channel from a cost perspective, or is it the way that you manage it impacts on its efficiency and its cost per interaction?
I find it expensive, in that I think the ping pong issue that's just been highlighted by Stephen is very real. I don't think it's always easy to give the right answer first time, and so you get into a conversation. And if that conversation is going on over days, as I'm afraid ours does, we had to do something about it. And that had to do something about it started, a good 18 months ago, when we started really looking at our web. So channel shifts started coming into the discussion. The web has and is being completely overhauled. I bought WebChat recently, and the WebChat is now feeding back directly into the web developer.
Cool.
So when we're on the WebChat, we're asking customers what they're trying to find, why couldn't they find it, and when we realise why they couldn't find it, we're correcting it.
Do you find that once people experience a new channel, so let's say WebChat as the example that you've brought forward, once they experience and have had a good customer experience of using WebChat, that might well deflect them making a call or sending an email in the future. So therefore, this multi-channel approach can actually help to sort of to spread the interactions more evenly across a large number of channels. And is that actually something that we want as modern-day contact centre managers?
Well, first of all, yes, it does. I mean, we had comments in the first week of what a wonderful service, why haven't we done this before? So that was very, very positive. It's continued in that vein. But my overriding thought process is now that if it's a simple question that customer can self-serve himself with, and if we can supply information on IVR, we can supply information on the web, we can do it on WebChat. If he can do it himself without any agent intervention, that's what we're wanting, and therefore that leaves the agents for the more complex calls.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think your comments there of real life experience echoes the research that Stephen highlighted that the CCA undertook in conjunction with Kana. What's your view on channel shift? Because I think when multi-channels started to sort of become a very hot topic in the contact center world, there were opinions that that you shouldn't force, or perhaps force is a little harsh, but you shouldn't steer the customer from one channel to another, that you should try and finish an interaction or resolve an issue within the channel of choice, i.e. the preferred channel that the customer has used. What's your opinion on if someone comes in on an email, you think it could be more effectively dealt with via a conversation on the telephone? What's your view on channel shift?
Well, if we're doing an email, we may, it depends on the question, but we may just ring the customer if we can possibly do that. If not, we'd answer the email and then say, do you realise that we've got this facility? And indeed, if you need to ask a similar question in the future, if you do this, this and this, you might get a quicker answer.
So is there an issue of, not an issue, but is there a case for managing expectations? It may be via the auto reply, or it might be what you put on your website next to contact list of of contact numbers and addresses, etc. Is that managing the expectation important?
Absolutely. I mean, telephone numbers particularly, but we try and direct them now to even the IVR. I mean, the voice recognition stuff can answer the question for them. If you appreciate recently all the stuff that's gone on, you'll have heard of the bedroom tax, as it's commonly called now. We have information about that on the IVR. So if they ring up with a specific question that's a generic question but specific to them, they'll get the answer. So there's many things like that. I think what you've got to watch is it has to make sure that the customer is satisfied and very happy with the response, whatever it is. And so I nearly got into metrics when I was talking earlier and didn't, but I've changed all the metrics. I don't bother now much about average handling time and things. I'm more bothered about, was the customer dealt with correctly at the first opportunity? And did he go away happy, having felt he'd had a very satisfactory call and been treated with respect whilst he was doing it?
And coming back to email, is customer satisfaction high off the back of emails? Is it better or worse than other channels in terms of delivering that experience? It's worse really, because we're still at about 2 or 3 days response, which is not good enough. What would your ideal target be, or what do you think is a suitable response? Because we've heard from other speakers that email shouldn't be viewed like web chat, where it's a spontaneous, ongoing conversation in real time. It's people shoot off an email because they're running out the door and they don't mind getting the response, later that day or the day after. What would you see as a respectable or appropriate response time? Well, I think first of all it does need the automated response, which might set the expectation of the customer. But again, it can depend on the topic that's within the email. I mean, if they haven't had their bin emptied, they need to know on the same day what to do. So you've got to get back to that. And I mean, ideally, on an average basis, I'd say within 24 hours. But that can cover all sorts of things. I mean, if it's a social care and it's an adult perhaps who's got some issues, they might want to be answered within 10 minutes. No, well, that's very interesting. And do you currently rely on the agents doing that prioritization manually, or are you mentioned speech analytics? Is that would you look or see the potential for text analytics to pick up on some of those points of urgency or priority? I think that's probably another move. I haven't looked at text analytics at all, but it's something that we tend to get somebody to flick through what we're getting in, if you see what I mean, to get some idea of what the thing is. But that's more manual than automated. I think there is a way, an opportunity to look at text analytics, and that may well be something that we start picking up on, but I haven't got there yet. Yeah, because what you said earlier about web chat, where you ask questions during the web chats, and that feeds back to the web developer, etc. I expect that a lot of the data contained within the interactions, whatever channel, can highlight that the reason that you've got 20% extra, whether it's emails or calls or web chats, is because let's take the example of the bins. But it was the root cause of that is because of a leaflet that was dropped that had the wrong day on it or something. Correct. Absolutely. And it's it's interesting, and it's it's good to see you sort of, even with the sort of the current budget constraints, seeing the importance of the technology to both improve the service and also the operational sort of functionality. That's very interesting. Barry, I could speak to you all day. You're a mine of information, and we'll definitely bring you back, obviously, for the Q&A at the end of the session. But I'm under pressure of time, so I'm going to say thank you very much, Barry, for the moment. That was absolutely fantastic, and I'm now going to bring in our final speaker for today, and Our final guest is Mark Davis, who's Head of Contact Centre Services at Environment Agency. Mark, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, very well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I hope you agree with me that, and also with some of the chat that's coming through on my control panel, that it's a really, really insightful and interesting session today. And you've got the advantage of being last, of having heard what other people have said, so we can actually pull out a point that other people have highlighted and see what your experiences are with regard to your work within the Environment Agency. So I think this will be a great final session. But if we could just start off, Mark, with just giving a little bit of an overview of yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see Mark's biography on the screen in front of you. But if you can just give us a bit of background on yourself and also the place that email has at the moment within the Environment Agency's customer interaction offering.
Sure. I mean, for me, customer services all my working life. It's a little bit a blast from the past because some of that was with Yorkshire Electricity, where I met Barry many years ago. Obviously, I was a young boy at the time. I can't speak for Barry. Got the opportunity to set up the Environment Agency's contact centre nearly 10 years ago now. So that was bringing in the emails, developing the phones and centralising the service that was spread across the whole country, well, across England and Wales at that time. Since then, we've added web chat, doing much more about social media at the moment. So all those different channels, and so emails is a core part of the service. Numbers-wise, it's way behind the phone calls that we take. So it's a second, but not a close second in the channel that our customers choose. But we've seen it increasing over the last few years, although possibly plateauing out, I think, at the moment.
And in terms of that portfolio of channels, and as you say, you've been adopting lots of the new channels, obviously in line with people's changing lifestyles and changing use of technology. As the Facebook generation comes through and Facebook adoption gets taken right through the generations up to those silver surfers that we referred to earlier, are the channels of choice, those preferred channels, are they changing? You say that telephone is still way out there at number one, but are you perceiving any change, change in channel preferences?
It's happening, and we're preparing for it, John. But I mean, social media, for example, very, very low take-up as a channel for customer inquiries at the minute. So we have a presence on Twitter and Facebook, and we're doing work to look across all social media channels, that looking where we can join conversations and going where our customers are. But as a channel for customer at the moment, that's very very low. Web chat. Our customers really like it. Some of the experiences that Barry's had around that, some fabulous responses actually from our customers. So we're not in all places on our website at the moment, but where we are, that's been very well received. But phones is the biggest one. I think email, we do get some similar queries as we do on the phones. We compare it to the phones, but we do get some of the more detailed, very specific information that customers do choose that channel. And actually, to a degree, we actually promote that, because there are certain things, that information that we hold under some legislation where customers have to write in, so we'll encourage that via email. So partly we're pushing some customers that way, but actually some customers are choosing it because actually their information they're after is quite detailed and specific.
So therefore, this may well be a governmental thing, but I expect it's reflected in other types of organisations that sort of have a regular element, like, let's say, insurance or banking, etc. Is email viewed as the formal channel, the modern day equivalent of the written letter, or do you see that customers view it as a channel of convenience and therefore ask a variety of things?
I think our experience, John, is it's a mixture of all those things. So yeah, we get very few handwritten inquiries into our team. So I think the email channel is being used for that. But we do as well get that convenience depending on when the customer thinks of their question. So our inquiry service, and the phone is only open Monday to Friday, 8 till 6. If it's outside that, then customers don't want to lose that question, so they might just pop it down on an email. So some of those questions are quite straightforward, and they are the same questions that we're getting on the phone and other channels.
And in terms of organisationally, we've heard examples of experiences of how to organise for the email channel. Do you take the sort of the multi-skilled approach and share the emails out amongst the particular sort of specialists who also answer the telephones, or do you have the dedicated team that are sort of email specialists? What's your view and experience of the sort of the organisational element?
We're probably in a little bit of a halfway house at the moment, and all our team are multi-skilled, which means they'll spend some part of their time on the phones talking to our customers, but other times doing other things. So we do a number of registration services for various environmental things which our team will do, and so they become the experts on, so can talk better to our customers. Or they may have email as their process they do when they're not on the phone. So we've not spread emails across the whole team, but we are spreading that wider, and so it's not everyone, but it's not just one core team.
And in terms of identifying the let's say the current telephone agents who would be a good email person, is there a sort of testing process to ensure that levels of literacy are at the required level and grammar and all that kind of stuff? What would you recommend as a process for an organisation that's looking to sort of ramp up a text-based interaction?
That's a very live issue for us at the moment, John, because we're just looking at expanding our team wider, and so we're going through that. Actually, can everyone do this? Because we train everyone to talk about the topics, and we have a very wide range that the Environment Agency covers. But that question I think that Derek raised initially was, but actually, can everyone write about the same topics? So mostly, our experience at the moment is yes, but we are looking at actually maybe it isn't everyone. So it's a live issue. Maybe if we get together in 6 months, I can answer that one better.
And sort of perhaps this is a gut feeling answer as well. Is it the same literacy skills or writing skills for email as it is for web chat, or is that holding a conversation and having to write in real time sort of a different skill set again? So I think probably the question is are the web chat and the email people sort of the same people, or do they require different competencies again?
Then just so happens they're not the same people, but they could be. I think there is so a gut feeling. I think there's from a web chat point of view, because that is more immediate, our customers may be more forgiving if we make a small typing error or something on the web chat, whereas I think there'll be less so on the email.
Yes, I think you have Mrs. Smith from Bracknell sending it off to the Daily Mail.
Yeah, that could happen.
And some people say, and we've hinted on it, we've hinted on it in earlier conversations, that one of the upsides of email is obviously you can give a more considered reply, which might be richer in terms of information and allow you to embed links and send attachments, etc. Is that your view on the main upside of the email? And if that is the flip side of that the response time issue that we've also touched on?
I think the upside from a planning point of view is that we don't have to respond to an email in 15 seconds, and so not adding to that challenge that we have on phone calls, and then that's an advantage from a planning point of view. We have a little bit longer to do that. So I think that's a plus, as again Derek mentioned about the richness. So if someone has been on a website and actually is after quite a wide variety of information, then we can provide a series of links. So again, that's if the customer asks the same question over the phone, we'll probably ask them for an email address, so we could send them all these links. So that can be the power of something that the customer can keep going back to.
Is there a temptation? I think this is something we haven't touched, although I think Derek mentioned it in passing. Is there a temptation with email to give templated responses. If you've got a common question coming through, you've got a prepared template answer. You cut and paste it, and with the result of a sort of a drop off in personalisation and a little bit sort of wooden and sort of less human. Is that a risk in the email world?
The short answer is yes, John. Certainly, it's something fine in our experience, and again something we're working at the moment. That there is a temptation to say, well, this kind of almost answers their question, so we'll paste that in. That's certainly the experience we've had, and it's interesting because that's not the attitude that we get when we're talking to customers over the phone. So there is that element of, actually, I think this answers their question, so it could probably be all right. Whereas on the phone, we wouldn't assume that. We'd probe and we want to know more and we want to confirm before we do that. So therefore, it is tempting to say, actually, I've got this answer that's worked before. I'll use this. So it's a very real risk, and one that we're working with our team in that, and we need to be very careful. Actually, are we applying pressure? Not directly, we think, but of that pressure of, I need to do this quicker. Of course, we like our teams to be able to work quickly, but not at the expense of actually not answering the customer's questions. Our principle on all our channels is let's make it easy for the customer to do the right thing for the environment. And also, giving the wrong answer isn't doing that. So we want us to take the appropriate amount of time that customer's query needs. So yeah, I think that we've seen there is a temptation to think, well, actually, I can rattle through this and I can do these quickly. But that's not necessarily coming, or not directly from us, but we're working with our team to think, actually, where is that pressure coming from? And it might just be because they can see that the inbox with another 500 emails in it.
And in terms of measuring the success of the email channel, are there any particular metrics that you either use or would recommend using as a measurement of whether email is performing for the organisation and performing for customer?
I think the measures that everyone will use very similar measures, I imagine, so in the same whatever channel. So we do ask our customers for feedback via phone, via our web chat, and via email. So a big challenge is always getting the right response rate to that. And at the moment, our customer satisfaction is lower on our email than it is over the phone and the web chat. And so again, that's one of the reasons why we're looking at, actually, are we matching the customer's needs? Are we understanding what they are, so we can make sure we're bringing that up? So I think there is a difference there. So we're asking very similar questions about how quickly we did it and how accurate did we answer the question. What was the professionalism that they experienced, whatever channel it is, so we then can compare across those channels.
And just finally, the question which has been common throughout the agenda today is what's your view on emails placed in a multi-channel environment? So therefore, shifting inquiries onto other channels when perhaps the telephone would be a better medium to conclude in as quick a time as possible a particular query, etc. What's your view on channel shift?
My view on that is clearly is that we're here to help the customer do the right thing for the environment. So actually, what's the easiest way to do that? And there is a human reaction of, yeah, but they've emailed us, so that's what they want. For some customers, that's true. So sometimes we may ring them and they say, actually, why are you ringing me? I want you to respond by email. But it's not as big as perhaps people think it is in their mind. So yes, that does happen. That's real. It's not a myth. But actually, it's a very small percentage. And I think the example was quoted earlier about, ringing someone about their email quite quickly can have a really positive response. And my team will be delighted that when they talk about ping-ponging, this is an official industry term. I noticed that's been used a couple of times. And that's the real drawback of emails, in that you have to make assumptions or read between the lines because we think this is what they're getting at. Whereas if it was on the phone, we'd be probing really to get to the root cause to make sure we're giving them the right answer. So if we need to do that, then we'll do that if we've got the phone number, or we'll ask them to call us, which I know it was something that Stephen said that doesn't always feel great. But if that's the best way to get the answer, then that's what we'll try and do.
Good stuff. Mark, great insight again, and thank you. And stay on the line because we're going to move into our Q&A session for the final 20 minutes of our of our program today. So I'm going to unmute our other contributors today. So speakers, be aware that you are now unmuted. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't yet sent a question through to our Q&A function, you can click on the question mark icon on your floating toolbar and put in your question. You still have time to do that. If you're leaving us now at the end of this sort of the formal part of our program, then you can catch up from the recording link, which I'll be sending through tomorrow with our thank you email. But click on that question mark icon and ask as many questions as you like. So I'd like to welcome back our guests today, Derek Smith, Barry Ibbertson, Mark Davis, and Stephen Thurlow. That's just got ahead of myself there, but actually it's quite useful for me to have that as an aid memoir. So I'm actually going to start off with you, Stephen, because an interesting question has come through, and one thing that I am aware of in this multi-channel, moving into omni-channel world is we shouldn't be treating particular channels in isolation, although for the purposes of getting under the skin of the sort of the operational challenges of particular channels, it's good to do it in this context. But bringing it back to that strategy context, back to the term omni-channel, one of our audience, Chris McGrath, has asked an interesting question, which is, what do the panelists see as the sort of the biggest challenge to move from a multi-channel to a true omni-channel operation? So, Stephen, can I point that question at you?
Yep, sure. Thanks for that. And it's a good question. And when we see a lot of organisations asking and saying, how do we do this? So, in terms of the biggest, I mean, if I pick up 2 or 3 of the big ones that I see different organisations pick as their biggest. So I think there's one around the whole top-down leadership that becomes customer-centric. So the omni-channel perspective to me is all around being customer-centric. It's starting to say, how does the customer get what they want, however they want to do it, rather than how does the organization get driven from operational or other metrics. So, one of the dangers we see is both channel and departmental silos within an organization. And an organization really needs to be able to think outside in and design the scenarios, the contact channels, the means of service around the customer themselves. And at that point, you find channels being less dedicated to any particular function or part of the engagement of the journey, and actually you empower the customer's journey effectively there. So the biggest challenge I see is certainly that whole customer centricity and start to think customer rather than thinking operational need. And I think, so just to say that, because lots of people say, oh yes, but I've got these targets. Well, my experience is that by thinking customer, you do meet the other objectives. But if you drive to meet the other objectives of performance, optimization, and handling time and these kind of things, you will fail to meet the customer's need quite often, and you're on a kind of almost diminishing returns. Whereas if you genuinely orientate your journey and communication model and the way you respond to them around the customer, you will achieve the efficiencies you need, because better journeys are often faster journeys, single contact journeys, self-service journeys, and so on and so forth. So definitely something around being customer-centric. I think the second key point to me is around agent empowerment. It's actually that if you give these guys, these are a social team, or these are a chat team, or these are an email team, you lose the ability to jump channel. You sometimes don't give them all the skills they need to do something. You start treating agents by the channel rather than by their function or the customers they can serve. And actually empowering the agents to serve the customer effectively, irrespective of channel, is another key thing here, that you actually don't mean they have to hand over to somebody else because they're not empowered to do something, but you give them all the answers and the business processes and the capabilities to do that, and to also to move the channels around. And the third thing is probably just technology legacy, that there's and also that there's a divide often between what I would call the sexy web, self-service, e-commerce part of an organization and the hard graft customer service end at the other side. And joining those two together so you think holistically about customer is a really important gap to close. So those are 3 challenges. Whether that's Chris's challenge, I don't know, but those are all challenges I've seen organizations wrestle with.
Barry, just picking up one of those points about sort of having this sort of holistic view of the customer and how they interact. I've often observed in the professional press around the service area that customers are starting to use multiple channels and sometimes at the same time to make contact with organisations. Is it important that you can be aware that that a customer had either very recently sent you an email and then an hour later given you a phone call. So to be able to join up those interactions, is that becoming increasingly important, do you think?
It's not in my experience, to be honest, John. The council is a huge, huge business, and really, to me, there you're almost talking a newfangled CRM, not the old stuff, but something that's got a holistic view of the customer and what he does. We're trying to update our CRM to a system that's more needed to our matched to our needs across customer service. So we do have some sort of holistic view of what goes on as far as the contact of the customer is concerned. But it's something which it's not in my experience at the minute. I would think that it is something that's desirable.
Derek, to pick up a similar point, is the need to have a holistic view of the customer in terms of their interaction history, is that becoming, in your view, more of a priority, or is it still either in your organisation or generally from your experience, is it still that organisations are taking one interaction at a time without a huge amount of insight into histories and the individual customer themselves, the personalisation element of it?
Yeah, I think it depends on the organisation, what you're going to do with that. And I agree with Barry. Why do you need to know if a customer has rung to renew a library book, has reported a pothole, and wants to know about an evening class? It's interesting, but what would you do with that information, and actually how would that help you to improve the customer service given to that customer? If it's, however, a sort of a sales environment whereby you can identify through the interactions with a customer that maybe they would be ideal for a new product or a new offer that you were going to consider, then that knowledge of that customer is quite important. So I think it's all about the service that you're delivering and what impact that knowledge would have in terms of how you'll be able to better support that customer.
Mark, just building on some comments made earlier about prioritisation. One of the questions which I've seen flashing up is with regards to, okay, you might not respond to an email for, let's say, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Do you have someone who is looking at those emails as soon as they come in to work out some level of prioritisation? Because someone might have, I think Barry might have touched on it earlier, or maybe Derek was saying, well, an email could be something, it could be an emergency. Now, obviously, that might not be the same context in your organisation, but there might be an email that comes through which demands a fast response, whereas others which you can be a little bit more, you take a little bit longer to respond to. So, is there an element of just reading through quickly the emails to spot some high priority things, or should that be something that organisations are doing?
It's something we used to do, but we try and avoid it now just because it's so inefficient, and the risk, if you're looking for us it was for MP letters or for notifications of incidents or complaints, is that depending on how many times you do that, you're reading the same email 5 times before anyone's actually thinking of responding to it. And so a few years ago we kind of turned our process that developed over many years, and some of it before we brought it into our centre, and just stripped it right back to actually we want to be out responding to it as soon as we can, so let's cut out all these handoffs. So I'm sure that's where Stephen said, hey, you could get a really cool system to do this for you, but we try and limit it. And the reason why I've not just said no, we don't, is if we are in a period of significant flooding or some emergency type situation like that, then we will change our working practices slightly to try and pull some of those out.
Oh, I get you. So if there is an emergency which you know is going to be generating some interactions, then you can gear up for that particular emergency, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. And Stephen, I think probably the obvious question is there a clever piece of technology that can identify or prioritize or help prioritize email response?
So obviously my answer is yes. Clearly we're a provider of that, and clearly we aren't the only one, but very much being able to blend it in with that knowledge and the broader channel perspective is really where we specialise, as well as the email itself. So I think some of what you learn there is you can't go from not analysing them to magically getting the right answer all the time overnight. There's a process of creating but by putting the management system in place and starting to analyze and feedback, and then you create a vehicle by which you can both learn and apply those learnings to action. And I think that's the really important thing there, that you do that. And I think the other thing, as you said, is when you get big things happening, such as a flood or whatever, or, then learning how you change not just maybe how an email is prioritized, but actually how the content the agents are serving with. I mean, we've seen that with working with over in Queensland when they had their floods in Brisbane. Being able to put knowledge and content back out every 5 minutes as to where the things are and how to handle missing person inquiries in a different way to what you used to do. And that's what I mean by empowering the agents. It's not just the channel, because they'll come at you with every channel at that point, email being one. And I think you need to empower the agents to serve them. So yes, you can. There is software to do it, but the key thing is to get a practice that lets you both manage it and learn from that, so you can keep acting and gradually refine what you do at the same time.
A question I asked Barry, and he didn't have he didn't have experience of it within his organisation. But from organisations that you're dealing with, are you finding that customers are starting to use multiple channels for the same question, or if they're not getting a response within a short period of time, they're jumping to social media to try and get a quicker response there? Are they sort of playing the channels?
We certainly see some of that, and I think social media is the one that's been played most actively recently. And I think one of the dangers of social media is a swift social service doesn't overcome the fact that your core processes might be broken. So if you're an airline and the flight has been cancelled for your own reasons, then you've still got a flight to manage over time. So yes, they might get a faster response. The key thing is to keep learning and feeding back into core processes as well. We certainly see people playing the channels. We certainly see people choosing which channel based on their own context. I think that's a good thing. I think customers, if they email, they're often emailing for a reason, because if there was someone standing next to them they could talk to, they would get that, they would ask them. If there was somebody they could phone and get through to and feel informed, then they would do that. But the context of, I just need to fire this off and I'll get an answer tomorrow, or it's often the customer's context that chooses the channel, and we certainly see them adapting to that by almost working through a system of what channels suit them most at that time, rather than necessarily saying, I'll get a better answer if I do that. I think there's a small percentage of customers think that way, but it is a relatively small percentage. It's more around what suits them based on the devices and presence and capability they have in their hand, and how soon they want an answer. Because one of the things is that we presume someone wants an answer to an email in a fixed time, but actually based on their context, the same email from different customers may have wildly different service demands. So one of them might be, for example, about to book a flight and they need to confirm something and it's got to be done right now. Another one might be asking a general inquiry about something that's happening in 3 months' time, and it could be a similar inquiry, but the context determines some of the urgency. So that's back to the omni-channel story. If you know that you get an email from a customer that you have an open case for, or a recent booking for, or a recent whatever, then you can start to apply more context to the routing and prioritization of those things. And ultimately, the model is to put common knowledge and common business processes behind it, so you get more and more consistent service, and gradually move those out to be easier and easier to access in terms of self-service and omni-channel.
And if Stephen, and I'm going to ask the same question, but I'm going to put you on the spot, Stephen. But if Mark, Barry, and Derek could just have a little think while you're answering, Stephen. In terms of one or two things that are perhaps the low-hanging fruit of improving email as a service channel, Stephen, what would you see as a couple of low-hanging fruit things that organisations can do pretty quickly to improve the customer experience from the email channel?
Low-hanging fruit always depends on where you're starting from as to how low the fruit is. So,
okay, let's assume.
But let's pick up some of those. So I think one of the ones that people miss is the whole structured inquiry model. So, whether you call them web forms or de-escalation, or it's being intelligent about what else can you get to capture at the point the message is originated, so that you can route and manage and give context to the agent better over time. So treating it not as just an email box someone sends something to, but actually as a structured inquiry that probably begins with a web or mobile browsing, rather than simply a desire to write an email back. I think the second thing is to think of it as part of which are the customer journeys that would benefit most from an email. And the next one I was going to say is related. Which are the ones that are the most nuisance and annoying ones? And to me, there's almost a graph you can draw of kind of along one axis, you draw the value to of the contact to the organization, and on the other axis, you draw the value of the contact to the customer. And the things that are in the bottom left quadrant are the things to focus on getting rid of. So if you're getting an email about something that's trivial, it's costing you a lot of money, so you've got a negative value, and the customer should probably be able to find that information easily. Therefore, it's not much valuable to them. It's just table stakes. Therefore, email becomes a difficult thing. Whereas if it's more, I think, as Barry was saying, if it's a social care inquiry, then actually the email might be a very authentic, a good channel, because there's a lot of record or history. You can put information in, you can put attachments in. So looking at the styles of contact you're getting and which ones both profit from being part of email and making sure they're well managed, but also which ones are good to eliminate as email because they're one of the most expensive ways to deal with it.
Okay, very good, excellent. I come to Derek first in terms of one or two things from your experience to make email a better channel.
I think from one thing that sort of hit me, and I thought it was whilst I was listening to the various discussions, is how I've used emails to feed into the frequently asked questions within the website, because basically, you can quite quickly pick up on there's something's happening. It may be something's gone wrong. It may be that there's a particular incident which is prompted, emails or contacts, and it's really using the email to, in terms of responding to the inquiry, but then posting that interaction on the website, obviously sort of depersonalizing it, which then helps you to interact with more than that original customer. Cool,
excellent, excellent. Barry, what's your nugget of wisdom with regards to improving email from a customer point of view?
Well, I'm back really to a comment I made earlier, and what I think Steve just said, and the summary would be, if the customer could have dealt with it by themselves, they need a different channel, and if it's a more complex one, then we should deal with it. That makes sense.
No, that makes absolutely perfect sense. Thank you very much, Barry. And finally, Mark, what insight from your many years of experience would you like to pass on to our audience?
I think the first one probably be what I've just mentioned, and just to have a look at how you are handling emails, and just ask yourself the question, how many times has this actually been read before someone's making an attempt to respond to it? And we were surprised at the answer, and if you are too, then I think that's a great area to focus at. And the other one is that Barry mentioned when talking about web chat, and we found that a great channel for feedback about actually what's not quite working on our website. But actually you can get a similar insight from your phone calls, a similar insight from your emails about why did the customer feel the need to get in touch with you? Is it because something you've said, you've done, your website, some letters that just don't quite make sense? And if so, if you fix them, then the customer doesn't need to get in touch.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us very neatly to 3 seconds before our 1.5 hour slot is up. So a very, very warm thank you to our guests today, to Derek Smith, to Barry Ibbertson and Mark Davis, and to our innovator and technology guru for today, Stephen Thurlow from Kana. So thank you very much for your fantastic insights from looking at the chat that's been going on my control panel. It's much appreciated by our audience today. Thank you very much to Kana for sponsoring and supporting this particular webinar, but also our continuing series of knowledge share activities. So thank you very much to them. And you can visit the Kana website at www.kana.com. If you want to look at future events, you can keep visiting. We will be posting more events as we book them in on contactcenterforum.co.uk/events. So finally, A big thank you to you, ladies and gentlemen, for spending your time to attend this Innovation and Best Practice webcast. I'm John Snow, and I hope to have your company again very soon in the future for another UK Contact Centre Forum event. Have a very good afternoon if you're listening live, and thank you for downloading and playing this webinar if you are listening to the recording. Thank you.